Actually, I was not supposed to do the presentation today, but then in the audience, I got several questions about the ecosystems. Someone asked me, should we set up an accelerator? And I talked to a bunch of startups and talking about their business and how they're validating. And I kind of came to the conclusion, okay, I got to do this presentation. But typically, I take 45 minutes to do this, and I'll try to do this very short, within 20 minutes. So please let me know, cut me off. Because I want to briefly talk about two things. And they might seem obvious, but it goes wrong every single time. Because people always ask me on the startup side, what's the most important thing that early stage startup should pay attention to? And then they ask me on the ecosystem side of what should we do to build an ecosystem. So I want to talk about two things. And that is validation on the startup side, very briefly. And then I want to talk about telling this story on the ecosystem side. So let's start about startups. The rock stars. You guys, at least most of you guys. And whenever, early stage startups approach me and we talk about what's going wrong, it's this, it's a lack of validation. So Mike Siegel just mentioned the number one thing that he showed in this chart is that nobody wants the shit that you're selling. It's the number one problem. That people invent stuff that nobody needs. And then whenever we look at the cycle and we look at where validation is typically shown, what people tend to forget that validation is something that you should do all the time. All the time. And you can actually do this when you have an idea only. And I'm sure you guys have read Lean Startup. And I'm sure 80% of you says we know Lean Startup, we understand it, we're implementing this. But there's one small book. Have you guys read The Mom Test? Rob Fitzpatrick, you have. Great. I love this book. I love it because it's so simple. There's one statement in the book, it goes, when you ask your mother whether your idea is great, she'll tell you anything. She'll tell you it's super. Of course, I love the idea. Go on. But that's not proper validation. Right? So everybody will lie, not just your mom. And at the end of the day, it's all about going out and talk to your customers. So this part, you would say, is obvious. Everybody does it. And my accelerator, I kid you not, I had developers come to me and said, Mike, can we outsource customer validation? Who of you in the audience developers? Okay. How often do you go out talk to the customer? You. Not to single you out there, but so the point is, early stage, you're a small team. Every single one of you should do the customer validation. Every single one of you. And more importantly than going out there and talk to the customer is the question of what you talk about. So it's a little small, I realize this, but you should talk about their lives, not your idea, right? You should talk about specifics in the past, what they do. You should talk about their behavior. Because this is the stuff I see all the time. That's what stuff that Rob Fitzpatrick mentioned in his book. And most of you will say, we don't do this. And I'm sure that most of you are still doing this because you're so inclined to talk about your idea, about your product, and convince people that what you do is great, that you actually forget to ask the right questions to validate whether what you do is worthwhile doing. So don't talk about your idea. Don't ask questions whether would you buy a product that solved this problem? What do you think about my idea? Or how much would you pay for this? Who of you has asked this question? How much would you pay for this? Honestly. No one? I see. Yes. So this is a question that's not the customer should answer, but you should come with an answer and then validate whether the price point is accurate. So the point is, anyone will tell you that the idea is great if you know them long enough. So better questions are, how do you currently deal with this problem? When does this problem pop up? Please show me how. So one thing that works the best is just to actually sit down. Watch, observe. When it's a product, just sit down with a customer and see how he uses the product. When you're developing a time management tool, You might want to ask, what are they currently using? Have they spent money in the past on time management tools? How much have they spent on it? What's the budget? What tools are you using? Can I sit down next to you and just watch how you're using that tool? Or why are you doing this? Why have you clicked on this button? Very specific things that trigger their behavior, that you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that you actually have money. You know, is the budget clear? Do you understand how much they're spending? So do you have quantitative data? So you want to talk about facts, not opinions. And whenever I talk about lean startup validation, this is the one sentence I think is most important. I wish I knew this sooner. Getting there faster. So let's talk just a little bit about ecosystems. I'm not talking about wise guys, that's what Vitaly mentioned, but every single time in Poland we had the same thing. So Max and me, we had an interview and they asked us about Silicon Valley. Should we build the next Silicon Valley? And we keep getting this question all the time. And I think the fact of the matter is, no one is going to replicate Silicon Valley anytime soon. If this is the baseline for Silicon Valley, then this is roughly how London looks like. Silicon Valley has been established over such a long time that it's not about copying Silicon Valley. In my opinion, it's about figuring out what you are great at and to focus. Because whenever we talk about an ecosystem, we talk about all these different parts. So we talk about the government support, which means incentives need to be there. You guys need to be able to build your business. Tax and everything needs to be attractive. The early adopters need to be there. Universities to create that new talent. Venture capital, we've talked about this already a lot. But at the middle, it's about the entrepreneurs. At the middle, it's actually about the talent. It's about the people. So the one thing I want to talk about is actually how to create those stories and what stories you want to talk about. Because in any ecosystem, it's about the stories that you might want to tell about special founders. I mean, here you tell the stories about Prezi, Ustream, other companies that are doing well. And these are the stories that inspire people locally, but also attract people from foreign countries to come here and to check out what's going on. So I want to highlight success stories. In Estonia, everybody talks about Skype, but it's getting an old story, right? Skype's been around for a while, so it's time for news stories. In Estonia's case, it's time for TransferWise to be the next story, for instance. GrabCat is a smaller story, right? So it's time for those news stories and to get those stories out there. Startup Chile has done, I mean, I'm sure actually, who knows about Startup Chile? A lot of them, right? Okay. Startup Chile has gotten a lot of critique about their program, and the main statement from a lot of people was, it's a waste of taxpayer money. Because they give away a 40K grant for zero equity. The only thing they ask in return is for the founders to come over to Chile and give back to the community. Mentor the startups, give workshops. And my statement is, that money, even if all the founders, or let's say all the startups that come there, will never, ever get to anything, that money was worth it for the marketing alone. That would be my statement. Because everyone I know in the startup scene knows Startup Chile. The program, what it's done for the country in terms of marketing value, in my opinion, was worth it alone. Not even to talk about the startups and what might come out of it. Another example is Tech City in London. When people talk about Tech City, at the end of the day, this is only a marketing term. That's how they branded a certain area of the city, got it out there, made an international name out of it, but it attracted so much talent and also capital to come to London. And now everybody talks about Tech City in London. It's been a marketing campaign, essentially. But it's been a story that people tell, that people understand, that people notice. So I'll tell you about one story in Estonia that I've been involved in. In Estonia, we got a bunch of entrepreneurs together. The question was, what should we do to place Estonia on a global map? What are the think out of the box, the great ideas? And Tamkivi, some of you might know him, he's the ex-CEO of Skype. He came up with the idea. He said, what if Estonia, which has a population of 1.3 million people, would have a population of 400 million people? And people said, it's impossible. Yes, it is impossible. The country is too small. So how about virtual citizens? What if Estonia would have 400 million virtual citizens? So he played around with this concept, and we discussed this, and now it's actually been implemented. So what the idea now is, it's a virtual citizen of Estonia. Everybody in the world can become a virtual citizen of Estonia. And what that means to begin with is that you can use the e-government structure, the infrastructure such as digital signatures, etc. You can use it. You get the ID card. And the next step, and much more interesting conversation, is will you pay your taxes? Right? Most of us here travel a lot, which means why are you paying taxes in a country where you, I don't know, might be 25% of your time? So in the future, that's going to be the question, because it's going to be determined by where you're physically located or something else. And this is one of those initiatives that's going to trigger this question, especially in Europe. How are we going to handle this? I love it. And it's an absolutely amazing story to tell. And this is something now that, like in the US, a lot of people talk about, say, Estonia, where's Estonia, what's going on? But people know the story. So let's brainstorm a little about other things, right? So people talk a lot about co-working spaces. So to make that link to Startup Chile, I triggered the discussion and said, if you really want to do co-working space, and a lot of times the government wants to put money in there, I said, if you want to do this, then do this well. And if you want to attract foreign talent, and you want to build a program and put a lot of money in this, then do this in a way that actually gains a lot of visibility and gets you marketing value. So in Estonia's case, I just, as a trigger, I said, they have a seaplane harbor. There's a huge submarine that you might see to the left. And I said, okay, if you want to build co-working space, then why don't you take this space, transform it, you send pictures around the globe of people, the startup desk in a submarine, and you say the best entrepreneurs and developers get a place for free here in Estonia. Anyone can apply. And you get a shit ton of, you get global PR, you get a shit ton of people who are interested to say what's going on there, you might want to check it out. So the overall spillover effect is so much bigger than anything mediocre that you can do. The same when you talk about education, which is the biggest pipeline for new talent locally. Why is it that in the majority of cases we still teach entrepreneurship in a very, very traditional way? A professor standing in front of a crowd like me, without the mic, telling you what you should do, validate your customers, and you think, yeah, heard it before. So at the end of the day, it's all about actually going out there and doing it. So why not give away a master thesis, like a master degree without doing a thesis? Why is it specifically in the context of entrepreneurship that we just do an incubation model? We have a startup actually going through the whole cycle, and if they succeed based on predefined KPIs, they get the degree. And if they don't succeed, they write a thesis about why did I fail, as a trigger. Example of PR, and I actually discussed this with the Estonian president, because they asked, what can we do in terms of PR that is relatively cheap, but it's going to be very effective? And I came up with an idea. I said, okay, why don't you invite all the entrepreneurs globally to apply to become co-president of Estonia for 2 weeks. So what this will mean is they will get a lot of ideas. You know, a lot of people will send the ideas of what Estonia should do in terms of entrepreneurship. They'll get global PR, co-president. I was like, what the fuck is going on in Estonia? And you don't have to do anything. Essentially, it's one person walking next to the president for 2 weeks' time, like an intern. It's nice visibility. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't cost you anything. You get global PR, and you get a shit ton of great ideas. Right? So my point is, think out of the box and do something different in order to stand out. And this is what I would love us in Hungary to happen, because every single time it's about, let's copy Silicon Valley and say, no, do something different. And it's the same about the accelerator. When people ask me, should I do an accelerator? I don't have the answer to this. I can't tell you whether you should do another accelerator. What I will say is there's more than 150 accelerators in Europe. If you decide to do an accelerator, I can tell you from experience, it's hard. When I started 3 years ago, there were very few accelerators in Europe. So I had the luxury to build the brand that it's now doing very well in comparison. If you want to start an accelerator now, it's going to be much, much harder. So then why do another accelerator? Why not instead do something different? Whatever that is. It might be validator. Why not do a program, you call it a validator, and the only purpose of that program is customer validation. That's it. And your entire program is structured around this. The beauty of it is actually, if it's a pre-acceleration program, is it will achieve 3 things. 1, you actually help the founders to do the customer validation properly, and at the end of the program, hopefully have an indication whether what you do is worthwhile doing. Second, the management of this validator can actually check whether the founders are good. Can they execute? They have the time to work with them to actually do this validation. And they can estimate the potential of the idea, which means at the end of this program, they can give a good recommendation whether this team should go to top accelerator, yes or no. Plus, again, it gives you much more PR value to do validator than another accelerator, 1 out of 150 plus something. So point being is, be different, use your strength, and focus in order to create amazing experiences. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying, my vision for Europe is not to build another Silicon Valley, to copy and try to be excellent in everything. What I would love to see in Europe would be to build hubs that are really great at something very specific. And this can be London for fintech, this can be Estonia for cybersecurity, and whatever it is in Hungary that you guys are great at. Focus on it, brand it, and then make sure that all those hubs work together to put Europe on the map and compete with Silicon Valley and all the other ecosystems out there. And instead of telling the story of what you currently have, I would love for you to tell the story of what you think will be there. So as Michelangelo said, I saw an angel on the stone and I carved until I set it free. And that's the story I would love for you to tell. The story of that angel, the story of what's going to be. So that was it. I hope it was on time, Vitaly. Thank you very much.